Welcome to week 9 of Bible Studies for Life. Today we continue in this great passage, the great chapter of Matthew 24, a challenging passage. Just going to look at a short passage today, a little piece of this this section on the return, the end times, and those things that are happening. Before we dive into Matthew 24, be sure and like, subscribe, share, comment on. Let us know questions you've got and all of that, and we'll see if we can't find some other answers for you. Okay, let's dive in. He says, "So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then those in Judea must flee to the mountains." Okay, the abomination of desolation comes out of Daniel. I think it's chapter 9, maybe chapter 10 and chapter 12. He's mentioned this one who is in the temple, who has abolished the sacrifices and has kind of taken God's place, attempted to stand in the place of the Lord, and the one who is an abomination to those things that are godly because of the way that he treats this temple and the holy place. Okay, he says, so when you see that spoken of, you see him standing in the holy place, then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. Now I told you that there is a destruction of Jerusalem and of the temple specifically that happens in AD 70 as the Romans come in and the Roman leadership stands in the temple and does some ungodly, unholy things there for sure. And so it's possible here that what he's speaking about is that already, but then the not yet. Remember that already, we look back now and we see, well, that's already happened, but maybe there's a not yet to this also, one who desires to take this place, to take the place of God, who desires to be worshipped instead of God, and who holds some sway over people for that. But he says, listen, when this happens, if you're there, you need to get out of town. It's going to be bad. And part of this is to say that, and read Revelation and see the things that happen there. The end times are not going to be good. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be easy. They're not going to be great days. This is going to be terribly harsh and difficult and challenging, and many will be tempted to turn their back on the Lord, and many will be tempted to walk away from their faith, and yet he is encouraging you to stand strong in that faith. He says, when you see this happen, if you're in Judea, flee to the mountains, run to the mountains, get out of town. Look at this, a man on the housetop must not come down to get things out of his house, and a man in the field must not go back to get his coat. Woe to pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days, which is to say it's going to be terrible, and you want to get to safety as quickly as possible because the mayhem is going to be unleashed. Sin, evil is going to come pouring out, and you don't want to be around when this is happening. This is going to be a terrible time. Now, there are some that have gone through these kinds of things. There are definitely some that have been through horrific things. Now we're in April of 2022 as we're shooting this, and so we think about what's going on in Ukraine and what many of those people are going through now. We think about other wars and things that people have been through, and we see the horrific nature that happens to those who are innocent, that get caught in the crossfire and who are unable to defend themselves and just suffer. They just suffer because of the mayhem, the evil that happens. And this is what this is going to be, this final days, it's going to be evil, and there's going to be mayhem, and it's going to be horrible. And he says, you don't go and try to grab your stuff. You just try to save your life. That there are things that are more valuable than the stuff you've got in your house. Just save your life. If you can just save your life, that's all you want to do. He says, pray that your escape may not be in winter or on a Sabbath. For at that time there will be great distress, the kind that hasn't taken place from the beginning of the world until now and never will again. Okay, listen, here's this clue right here, this verse, right? At that time there will be great distress, the kind that hasn't taken place from the beginning of the world until now and never will again. You see that? Okay, we've already talked about there have been people that have gone through difficult times, right? and we can name, we can go back through history and we can pick out these horrific times that people have had to endure through that have lasted sometimes for years at a time. And they've had to go through this and endure through horrific things in their own lives and very difficult trials. But look at what he says here. The distress that he's talking about here hasn't taken place from the beginning of the world until now and never will again. That this, what he's saying here, what he's describing here as we get to the end of time, is a distress, is something that is worse than anybody has ever been through before. Now, I want to say this because I think sometimes, we tend to exaggerate our own experience, don't we? And we tend to think, well, nobody has ever had to go through what I've had to go through here, and nobody's ever had to endure. And the reality of it is we know that's not true, right? That lots of people have gone through things as bad or worse than many of the things that we go through. But what Jesus is saying here is very clearly, no, what will happen at this time will be the worst that anyone has ever gone through. And so at that point, you to realize as we think about the worst things that people have had to endure, the worst things that people have gone through, what he is saying here is that in the end of time, it will be worse than all of that. It will be greater distress than the worst that you can ever imagine. It will be greater than that. I don't know about you, but it's not real encouraging. It's not real encouraging to say, hey, it's going to get worse. It actually could be worse. It actually will be worse. It actually will get harder. And there's not a lot of encouragement in that, except to know that unless those days were cut short, no one would be saved. That is, no one would endure. Not to say that no one would gain salvation eternally, but that no one would live through it. But those days will be cut short because of the elect. You see this promise that the Lord gives, that as bad as it is in those days, the Lord will end it before everyone dies, before everyone is lost, to save the elect. And what we have here is this promise that in the midst of the greatest horror that any person has ever gone through in all of history, greater than anything anybody has ever gone through, the Lord is still in control and still calls an end to it, a limit, puts a limit on it. The sovereignty of God does not get suspended during the horrific actions of man at the end of time. His sovereignty endures, and it is not limited by the fact that we think this is the worst that anyone could ever go through. The Lord, just because we're having a difficult time, does not mean that the Lord is not in control. He is. He is in control, and he will bring it to an end. He will declare the conclusion of it. And there is some encouragement for us. I hope that even as bad as it, and his statement here, his factual statement is, it's going to be bad, but I'll end it. It will come to a conclusion. I will declare the time when it ends. So we should consider that. We should think about God's sovereignty over all of it, as bad as it is, and recognize God's deliverance of those whom he loves and who have given their lives to him, that he will deliver. We will be saved out of it. And what a precious promise that will be. And there may come a time in our lifetime when that's all we have to hold on to, is that before it's all said and done, the Lord will be the one who says when it's all said and done. He is the one who will declare it in the end. And he will deliver us in the end. We may lose our lives, but we'll not lose our salvation. He will save us in the end. All right, I hope that helps. This is the tough passage. It's tough things we're looking at, but I hope it helps as you study. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Thanks for teaching, for putting yourself out there, being willing to help others find the truth in God's Word. Be sure and like, subscribe, share this with others, ask questions, comments. You've got them. Please share those with me. We'll see you next time.